Welcome to our Saturday Simulcast, joined by Tom Dienhart and Brian Neubert. I want to thank the Purdue Union Club Hotel for sponsoring and the 811 restaurant as well. And this is obviously a disappointing from last night's game. Purdue's lost to, or Thursday night's game, I should say. Purdue's lost to Rutgers, but a lot of questions about what looks ahead. We'll also talk about Purdue football as the Boilermakers get ready or begin preparation for Purdue and Tennessee on December 30th in Nashville. So a lot of storylines heading into that game. But Brian, I'm going to start with you. You know, you've had close to 24 hours, maybe 20 hours to kind of look at that game last night. And what you saw, you articulated it well in the moment last night, but now looking at it from the lens of 20 hours later, what do you see? You know, it was a disappointing loss, obviously, but there's a growth process that goes on with respect to basketball seasons, and one would think Purdue needs to be on that trajectory.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, as good as Purdue had been prior to last night, I think there were some indicators percolating that kind of led you to believe that, you know, something like this might be possible. They looked vulnerable. You know, I didn't think they played great against Florida State, and I say that, and they ended up beating a decent opponent, generally a high-quality opponent by 28 points. And then, obviously, the last 10 minutes at Iowa was only a quarter of a game, but, you know, obviously that was quite a scare. Purdue has had to do a better job just coveting possessions, valuing possessions, protecting possessions. They're too good an offensive team to deny themselves at bats, and they're not a good enough defensive team to compromise themselves by turning the ball over and taking bad shots. And I think the turnover issue is only part of it. I think Purdue played with a certain casualness about it from an offensive perspective. And then just the attention to detail from a defensive perspective just has to get better. You know, Purdue is doing something here where there's going to be vulnerabilities all year long. They're playing big. They're playing a 7'4" guy at center. As good as he is moving his feet and covering ball screens, he's still 7'4". So your ceiling there is limited. So you're playing a high school center at power forward. You're playing as big as probably any team in the country at the 5 and the 4. That's going to come with some really difficult matchups. You have to be really detail-oriented about this in order to overcome some of those things. And then the other part of it too is if you're going to play big, you have to dominate on the interior at the other end of the floor. I thought Zach Edey got off to a slow start. I didn't think, even though his numbers look good at the end of the game, I didn't think he played his best game. It was kind of hard to get him going here the last couple of games in Big Ten play. So Purdue's just got to be better. And I think that was something that I tried to talk about, you know, leading into Rutgers. Not that I expected them to lose to Rutgers, but I thought this sort of thing would catch up to them, you know, potentially at some point. And sure enough, it did, because it never should have came down to that last second shot by Ron Harper.
Yeah, I mean, I guess is this team as good as we thought, Brian? That was a Rutgers team that didn't have Geo Baker. Iowa didn't have its best player playing either. A guy who averages about 25 points a game. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how the team responds to this, what their counterpunch is, because that was certainly a punch in the nose. And like I said, it'll be interesting to see what the coaching staff does moving forward. NC State's next. And you have Butler. The Big Ten is going to be a rough and tumble league. And I know there's going to be other teams that stumble along the way, but like you guys said, it's always a part of trying to continue to evolve as a team and as a program moving forward here. Purdue certainly has its challenges.
Well, to the question of are they as good as we thought they were, I can't answer that question unless I know how good someone thought they were. If they thought Purdue was unbeatable, they were wrong. And they were wrong from day one. They were wrong even when Purdue beat Villanova in Connecticut. This team has always been beatable, no matter how it might have looked. Are they a really, really good team? Yeah, they still are. That didn't change last night. Sometimes you just lose a basketball game. Sometimes you just kind of phone one in every now and then. That's the nature of college basketball. It's a really funny game. It is unpredictable young males. The most combustible commodity on earth, as I like to say. But as I always say, that you don't win Big Ten titles necessarily by beating the other best teams in the league. You win Big Ten titles by not falling asleep on a Thursday night at Rutgers. And sure enough, lo and behold, game 2 of the Big Ten season, that's exactly what Purdue did. And that's the real kicker in all of this, is to hell with number 1 in the country. That's not the front burner issue here for Purdue. That was a nice little superlative. It was great for the program. But the bigger deal here is that Purdue just gave one away in the Big Ten race. And these things have a funny way of getting close, even when, it doesn't look like the rest of the league is great. It'll be a close race down the stretch, mark my words. And the fact that, Purdue basically just gave the field a game here is really the worst part of this, because there have been some losses the last few years. The Wisconsin game at Wisconsin years ago, where it essentially cost Purdue a share of the Big Ten title.
Sure did.
And then that Nebraska game at Nebraska a couple years back ultimately didn't matter because the NCAA tournament was canceled, but Purdue would have missed the NCAA tournament almost certainly, and that would have been the biggest red mark on that resume. These things have a funny way of catching up with you. Every single game matters, and Purdue let one get away last night that it should have had.
Yeah, you look at this last night and the fact that, okay, Travion Williams, they get the play they want at the end, score, and then a guy makes it. Again, I was searching my old brain about when has that happened to Purdue, and I can only think of one game, and that was the opening game in the history of Mac Erie in 1967 against UCLA. Bill Sweek hits a 50-footer at the buzzer to beat Purdue. I can't think of any other game, and maybe I'm missing something.
At Michigan State a few years back, Miles Bridges made a really long 3 to beat him, but I don't think it wasn't a buzzer beater.
No,
it was just a standard 3. It was long, but it wasn't a
45-footer, and a step like you well pointed
Euro
out.
stepped. I've never seen anyone do that. He Euro stepped. Purdue did everything right on that shot.
Yeah, and
put his hands up, foul the guy. Jaden Ivey picked him up as soon as he inbounded it. It just there's nothing you can do except not be in that position.
So my question is somewhat rhetorical in nature, but the fact that, all right, Travion Williams scores with 3.7 seconds left and you win that game, what do you have? Does that just, Matt Painter talked about after Iowa, it's always good to win a game when you don't play well or you don't play your best and you still win. Now you find a tough game to lose and you didn't play your best, but you lost it. How much difference does that make in terms of where the not only the trajectory, but just where this program is going in terms of that number 1 rating and all that? Would they have held on to that? Yeah, maybe. But how much does that matter at this point?
Well, what would have mattered had Purdue won is they would have lived to fight another day. They would have gotten away with it, and the most important thing there was getting that win in that Big Ten race, as I mentioned earlier. But, Purdue wasn't good enough to say they deserved a win, but Purdue was good enough to escape anyway. It's just they just didn't do enough through the course of the game to keep themselves out of that position at the end. That being said, Ron Harper Jr. makes that shot 1 out of 100 times probably in that situation, guarded the way Purdue guarded him. But Purdue, just needs to be better in the first half. They need to be better in the final minute and a half, where they had 3 possessions that just were disasters. And I'm counting the travel in the backcourt as a possession, even though Purdue never even got in the front court with it. Purdue just has to take better care of the ball. They have to be better defensively. They have to take better shots. That they have guys who just did not play with poise last night too. And that on some level, that has to be a function of being on the road for the first time. Now, that being said, Purdue should not have to deal with that because, they are better. They are significantly better than Rutgers. But I think the road did sort of affect them, because if you look at the way Purdue missed shots early on, they get the ball inside to Zach Edey twice on the first 2 possessions, I think, and he misses badly. Isaiah Thompson missed a 3, unlike any 3 I think I've seen Isaiah Thompson miss.
Yeah.
Brandon Newman is 1 of 6 from the floor with 3 turnovers in 13 minutes. They've just got to have steadier play from some of these guys. Obviously, it wasn't Sasha Stefanovic's night, but these guys just have to be steadier than they were. Guys are going to struggle, but missing shots and playing without poise when you need poise are 2 different things. If you had played with a little bit more poise, the fact that you didn't shoot well doesn't matter. The fact that Rutgers shot really well probably doesn't matter, because you wouldn't have given away as many possessions as you gave away. And when you end up losing on a buzzer beater, hey man, 1 more point or 2 more points. I shouldn't say 1 more point. If you just 2 more field goals, you don't have to worry about a buzzer beater. 1 good possession out of those 3 toward the end of the game prior to Trevion Williams would be game winner. 1 of those 3 possessions gets you anything. Even just a good possession might have won this game. But no going back now.
Yeah. All right, Tom, we're going to switch to some football talk here. And obviously the men play North Carolina State, and Brian will have more on pregame look at that on the site on late Saturday afternoon and Sunday. And Purdue plays at 2:00. But all right, now back to football. Purdue football practice started on Friday, and yet we're not going to have availability until Monday. A big story is certainly the fact, I think it was Thursday night, David Bell and George Karlaftis do something that Purdue hasn't done since 1972, and that's 2 Walter Camp first and second team All-Americans. The significance of that, but also the significance that they're unlikely to play in this bowl game, certainly weighs heavily on the positive side, but not necessarily in the negative, but just the reality of what Purdue may be looking at when it faces Tennessee on December 30th.
Yeah, it's nice to see those guys get their postseason accolades, right? I kind of thought maybe David Bell was going to win the Biletnikoff Award. I was certainly stunned when the guy from Pitt won it.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, Bell was the Big Ten Receiver of the Year. Both he and Karlaftis were consensus all Big Ten. Now we're starting to see some All-America accolades come in for 2 guys who gave their all for 3 years for the Boilermakers. And I don't think anybody can begrudge those 2 with going pro early to get wealthy. And I think it'd be hard to quibble with their decision if they decide not to play in this bowl game. I think it's probably a foregone conclusion. There's been no official word yet, but I think most of us would agree that the likelihood of them playing is very slim. Too much to risk. So Purdue will have to deal with probably some key personnel losses there. But again, nice to see those guys get their accolades. And for the program too, right? That 2018 recruiting class, right? 2019 recruiting class was a big one for Purdue. The year after Rondale Moore, the guys like Bell and Milton Wright and Karlaftis in particular. King DeRue was in that class. TJ Sheffield and Mershon Wright.
Jalen Graham.
Yeah, Jalen Graham and Marvin Grant. That was a great recruiting class, and there's a lot of those guys are still around. And speaking of recruiting guys, this Wednesday signing day, and Purdue's got 19 commits right now, I think, and trying to add maybe a few more here coming up. So yeah, there's a lot going on. Like you said, Alan, practice is started for the bowl. Signing day on Wednesday. Brian's out covering basketball, so there's a lot percolating, and certainly that bowl game on December 30th in Nashville's filled with a lot of opportunity. Fans may be disappointed with the destination because Purdue was just there, but I think the chance to play the SEC, Tennessee in particular, I know there's always risk when you play those teams. They're awfully talented, but it's a great opportunity for Purdue to measure itself against the nation's best conference and a Tennessee program that's on the rise.
Yeah. Brian, you look at the last, 4 days to signing day, but also just everything else in terms of just trying to keep that level of where Purdue wants to be as a program. And this is got a couple 4-stars in this recruiting class. We know that, and Brady Allen and Strickland as well. But all these factors play into, again, trying to keep that foundation where you want it. What do you see that from signing day standpoint, and also that Bell Karloftis, the fact that yes, if they don't play in the bowl game, that's a negative, but yes, also you got two guys that have really shown at Purdue that they can thrive and get an opportunity to play in the next level by coming to Purdue.
Yeah, first of all, let me apologize for the squeaky office chair here at the Home Team Suites. It's not behaving. Yeah, what's really important at Purdue is to, be able to recruit. To quote Danny Hope, a couple of difference makers. To have a couple on your roster at all times, and that's exactly what Rondell Moore, David Bell, and George Karloftis were. And I think that the fact that those guys came to Purdue with Purdue preaching to them, you come in here, you be an instant impact guy, we will make all your dreams come true, so to speak, to quote Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite.
That's a deep cut.
That is good. That's good.
That was random.
Yeah.
I just have movies playing in my head all day long. I don't know what's going to come out. It's really helpful to the program in the big picture. Like David Bell came to Purdue largely because Rondell Moore, because Purdue told him, hey, we have an offense that'll feature you. We're in a position as a program, and you're a good enough player to come in here and start from day one and be one of our best players. And that's exactly what happened for Rondell Moore. So when David Bell sees it happen for Rondell Moore, all of a sudden Purdue's pitch to David Bell has a lot more credibility. And for whoever that next guy is, to see these three guys who took a leap of faith on Purdue, in sort of the transactional nature of recruiting nowadays, it's so built around, here's where we can help you get. That's kind of the thing about David Bell and George Karloftis going pro and skipping the ball game, presumably, is that this was the plan all along. This is always a 3-year plan for all of those guys.
Yeah.
And it'll be a 3-year plan for the next guy. I don't think necessarily it's been articulated to like a Joe Strickland or somebody like that, but I think the writing is on the wall that, hey, if you're good enough, if you live up to how good we think you are, how good everyone thinks you are, we don't even want you here your senior year, because we want you to go do what you dream of doing, and we want to help you get there. That's how you get those guys. And Purdue needs to get a couple more of them, to build future teams around. You got two really good ones in Brady Allen and Joe Strickland. I think the next class is one where you would like to get a couple more stars, build around them with some of the, try to build up the line of scrimmages, try to get some actual depth in your secondary, try to get a running back, so on and so forth. Make sure your special teams are okay, but make sure you're putting functional pieces and as complete a team as you can around a few foundational type of pieces. And that's where, Purdue has to go in recruiting. And as far as this class goes, it's just so hard to tell with these high school kids nowadays, because this is going to be a situation where every year the transfers are going to come in. And the reason Purdue's freshman class was virtually non-existent on the field this year was because the transfer market has cannibalized freshmen's opportunity everywhere. You have to be a pretty damn good freshman, a pretty special freshman in a lot of cases, to get on the field right away nowadays. So the whole paradigm around all of this has totally changed, because it used to be one of the first questions we'd always ask, on signing day is, which of these guys do you see playing right away? And now you ask that question on signing day, the coach, if he's being honest, would probably say, well, probably no one. And then if those guys don't play right away as freshmen, the musical chairs all of a sudden in the transfer portal era is going to take hold. And who knows if these guys are even around for year two. Look what happened with Malik Carr last year. It's just, there's just, the freshman recruit is less important than he has ever been. That doesn't mean he's not important, because you want to take a lot of those guys, redshirt them, and hope you have, 4th and 5th year seniors a few years down the line. But that being said, even if you do, you're still going to be recruiting the transfer portal every year. So I don't even remember what your question was. I've been playing Napoleon Dynamite in my head still. But I think the most important part of this is Purdue find some guys who can emerge as those really high end sorts of players, and that's where I think Brady Allen and Joe Strickland kind of lead the list.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Last question for our Saturday Simulcast. Tom, Tennessee, you've looked at them a little bit this week. Obviously, from a very broad stroke view, obviously they got skill at quarterback. They're fast offensively. They can score. Their defense may not be as much, but what do you see Purdue's biggest challenge will be to keep that a 4-quarter game down in Nashville?
Just that offense. I mean, that's what they're all about. It's Josh Heupel's signature is his offense, the quick pace, no huddle, go offense that he's brought with him from Central Florida. We all know Jeff Brom's an offensive coach too. So you got 2 offensive-minded head coaches, and that's going to be the worry for Purdue, guys. Is trying to slow down that Tennessee offense. If you look at the stats, they come out firing early. They tend to bury teams in the first quarter. So Purdue's going to have to weather probably a storm early. And I was just talking to some people down on a radio show in Knoxville today, and I thought maybe best thing Purdue can do is keep the ball away from Tennessee. And I know they don't run the ball, Purdue, that well, but they can still control the ball with their short passing game. And we've seen them do that, have long, sustained drives. And if they can do that for long stretches, hit some big plays of their own and get a lead, obviously that will help. So, just the worry of that Tennessee offense and how potent it is with Hendon Hooker, that Virginia Tech transfer quarterback, a guy who not only passes well, but also runs well, a real dual threat. And you guys heard Jeff Brom on Sunday say that they haven't seen an offense like that this year yet. They've got extra time to prep, but it's going to be hard to simulate what Tennessee does, obviously, in practices. But, Purdue's going to have its work cut out for it, especially defensively against this Tennessee team.
Yeah, going to be interesting thing we'll be talking about next week and probably the week after that as we look into the December 30th game, Music City Bowl, Purdue, Tennessee. All right, Brian, we're going to let both of you go, and Brian's going to have a busy day on Saturday and obviously into Sunday for Purdue, North Carolina State. We want to thank all of you for watching and listening to our Saturday simulcast, and we'll look forward to next week's show. I want to thank our Union Club Hotel sponsor and the 811 restaurant. We appreciate them, and have a great week, everybody. And we'll all look forward to not only Purdue basketball this week, but more football news on the site as we continue to look forward to the Music City Bowl. Have a great week, everybody.